If I told you there was a $1.7 trillion parallel banking system operating in plain sight and 99% of you have no idea how it actually works, you'd probably call me a conspiracy theorist. But here's the thing. It's not a conspiracy. It's called private credit. And while you've been sleeping, it has eaten Wall Street's lunch, taken over the global financial system, and turned a handful of 30-year-old analysts into the gatekeepers of the American economy. You think the bank down the street is the one lending money to businesses? Cute. That bank is too scared, too regulated, and too busy charging you overdraft fees to actually take risks anymore. So, who is lending the money? Who is funding the private equity takeovers? Who is keeping that struggling manufacturing plant alive or pulling the plug on it? It's not who you think. It's not a guy in a corner office smoking a cigar. It's a 26-year-old with a Bloomberg terminal, a spreadsheet the size of a novel, and the power to decide whether 500 people keep their jobs next Friday. I spent the last 6 months talking to these people, direct lenders, mezzanine cowboys, distressed debt vultures. I wanted to understand the machine, and what I found, well, let's just say if private credit were a Tinder date, it would be the guy who shows up in a rented Ferrari, promises you the world, and then asks to borrow money for gas on the way home. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly why the banking system as we know it is dying and the 3 types of private credit lenders who are picking the bones. By the end, you'll understand the machinery that wants you to stay ignorant about where money actually comes from. You'll see the graveyard of companies that trusted the wrong lender. And most importantly, you'll learn the one question you need to ask if you ever sit on the other side of that table. This isn't theory. This is the underbelly of capitalism, and it's running on $1.7 trillion of your pension money, your insurance premiums, and your 401k. Look, I'm not going to pretend I ran a private credit fund at 25. I didn't. I was the girl with a liberal arts degree and a mountain of student debt, watching my husband grind away as an analyst at a mega fund. He'd come home at 2 a.m., eyes red-shot, mumbling about covenants and EBITDA add-backs. I thought he was speaking a foreign language. But I listened. I asked questions, and slowly, I realized he wasn't just crunching numbers. He was part of a shadow financial system that touches every single thing you buy, every job you might want, and every company that fails. I saw the emails. I heard the phone calls. I watched the deals where a company got saved and the deals where a company got bled dry. And I'm going to tell you exactly how it works. To understand private credit, you have to go back to 2008, the financial crisis. After the banks nearly blew up the planet, the regulators came in with a sledgehammer. Dodd-Frank, Volcker Rule, capital requirements. Suddenly, if you were a bank, lending money to a medium-sized company became a regulatory nightmare. It tied up your capital. It invited scrutiny. So the banks did what anyone would do when the rules get too hard. They stopped playing. They pulled back. They tightened their lending standards, and a massive gap opened in the economy. Companies needed money to grow, to buy competitors, to survive, and the bank said, sorry, can't help. Enter the vultures, the opportunists, the private credit funds. These weren't banks. They were investment firms, Blackstone, Apollo, Eris, KKR, raising giant piles of cash from pension funds and insurance companies, saying, give us your money. We'll lend it to these companies the banks are ignoring, and we'll charge them double the interest. And it worked. It worked so well that today, private credit is bigger than the entire high-yield bond market. It's bigger than the leveraged loan market. It's the go-to source of capital for half of corporate America. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all private credit lenders are the same. They are 3 distinct species, and they operate very differently. And if you ever run a business or work for one, you will meet all 3. Type 1, the direct lender. This is the entry level, the foot soldier. Imagine a private equity firm wants to buy a company. Let's call it Bob's Plumbing Supplies. It's a solid business, makes $10 million a year. The private equity firm needs to borrow $50 million to help pay for it. They can't go to a bank. The bank says, too risky, too much paperwork, we're not interested. So they call a direct lender. The direct lender says, fine, we'll give you the $50 million, but we're not stupid. We're going to charge you 9, 10, 12% interest, and we're going to put a first lien on everything Bob's Plumbing owns. If they miss a payment, we take the building, the trucks, the inventory. We own Bob. Now, who is the person making that loan? It's a 26-year-old analyst named Chad. Chad went to a Target school, worked 80 hours a week as an investment banking analyst for 2 years, and then burned out. Chad now works at a direct lending fund. His job is to build a financial model that shows Bob's Plumbing can afford the debt. Chad has never run a plumbing business. He's never met Bob, but he's the one deciding whether Bob gets the money. And here's the dark secret. Chad gets paid based on how many deals he closes, not on whether Bob's Plumbing succeeds. If Bob's Plumbing goes bankrupt in 2 years, Chad has already collected his bonus. The direct lender's incentives are completely misaligned with the company they're lending to. They just need the loan to look good on paper long enough to get their bonus. It's called extend and pretend, and it's the norm. But wait, it gets worse. Because direct lenders don't just lend money and hope for the best. They put something called covenants in the loan agreement. Covenants are like tripwires. If Bob's Plumbing's profits dip below a certain level, or if they hire the wrong person, or if the economy sneezes, Bob triggers a covenant breach. And when that happens, the direct lender can do one of two things. They can waive the breach, or they can call the loan due immediately. Calling a loan due is the nuclear option. It forces the company into bankruptcy. And guess what happens then? The direct lender takes the collateral. They become the owners of Bob's Plumbing. They just bought a company for pennies on the dollar, using the company's own debt as the weapon. It's called loan to own, and it's the fastest way to acquire a business without paying for it. Hedge funds love this. They call it activist lending. The rest of us call it legalized theft. Now let's talk about type 2, the mezzanine lender, or as I like to call them, the guy who shows up after the party has already started and demands the last slice of cake. Remember Bob's Plumbing? The direct lender gave them $50 million at the top. That's the senior debt. It's the safest. If things go bad, the direct lender gets paid first from the ashes. But what if Bob's Plumbing needs more money? What if they need $60 million total, but the direct lender only wants to risk $50? Enter the mezzanine lender. They provide the missing $10 million, but they're standing behind the direct lender in line. If Bob's Plumbing goes bankrupt, the direct lender gets paid first. If there's anything left, the mezzanine lender gets scraps. So to compensate for that risk, the mezzanine lender doesn't just charge interest. They charge 15, 18, sometimes 20% interest. And they take a piece of the company, equity warrants, a slice of the upside. Now, who is the mezzanine lender? She's usually a woman in her late 30s named Jennifer. Jennifer has been doing this for a decade. She's seen cycles. She's seen companies blow up. She is absolutely ruthless. Jennifer doesn't care about the interest rate as much as she cares about the warrants. She wants to own a piece of Bob's Plumbing when it gets sold in 5 years. She's playing the long game. Jennifer's job is to structure the deal so that if the company succeeds, she makes a killing. And if the company fails, she's protected because she's got a contractual right to convert her debt into equity at a discount. It's called a PIK toggle, payment in kind. If Bob's Plumbing can't pay the cash interest, they can pay it with more debt. It's a credit card that charges interest on top of interest. It's how companies drown in debt while everyone at the top gets rich. I want to pause here and show you the graveyard. You remember Toys R Us, right? The giant toy store that went bankrupt in 2017? Here's what the news didn't tell you. Toys R Us wasn't killed by Amazon alone. It was killed by private credit. A private equity firm bought Toys R Us. They loaded it up with debt. The direct lenders provided the senior loans. The mezzanine lenders piled on with high-interest debt. The company had to pay so much in interest every year, hundreds of millions of dollars, that they couldn't afford to invest in their stores or their website. The debt was the weapon. The lenders got their fees. The private equity guys walked away with millions, and 30,000 workers lost their jobs with zero severance. That's the machinery. That's the system. And it's completely legal. Now, here's the controversial take that will make every finance bro in the comments lose their mind. Everyone says private credit is democratizing finance, giving Main Street access to capital that the banks won't provide. That's a lie. Private credit isn't democratizing anything. It's creating a two-tiered system. The rich, well-connected companies get money at reasonable rates. Everyone else gets crushed by 12% interest and predatory covenants. The pension funds and insurance companies who invest in these private credit funds, they're the ones making the money. The average person's retirement savings are being used to fund loans that destroy jobs. You are literally investing in the machine that's bleeding the economy dry, and you don't even know it. Which brings us to type 3, the distressed debt vulture. This is the end game. This is what happens when Bob's Plumbing finally breaks a covenant, misses a payment, and heads toward bankruptcy. The vultures don't lend to healthy companies. They wait for the car crash. Then they show up at the scene with a checkbook and a lawyer. Who is the distressed debt investor? It's a man in his 50s named Stephen. Stephen has seen 4 financial crises. He's got a resting heart rate of 40 and zero empathy. Stephen buys the debt of dying companies for 30, 40, 50 cents on the dollar. He buys it from the original lenders, the Chads and Jennifers, who just want to get out before the ship sinks. Then Stephen shows up in bankruptcy court and says, I own 60% of this company's debt. I call the shots. Stephen doesn't want the company to recover. He wants to own it. He wants to strip it for parts. He wants to fire the pension plan and sell the real estate. There's a famous quote from a distressed debt investor. The best returns come from companies that go bankrupt, not companies that survive. Read that again. That's the game. They profit from failure, and they're very, very good at it. So we've met the 3 lenders. The direct lender Chad, who gets paid to close deals, the mezzanine cowboy Jennifer, who wants your equity and your soul, and the distressed vulture Stephen, who prays for your failure. But here's the question you're probably asking. If this system is so predatory, why do companies keep signing up for it? Because they have no choice. But before I reveal the most important step, the one thing you need to know if you ever find yourself on the other side of that table, I need to show you what happens when all 3 of these lenders work together. I'm talking about the deal that became the blueprint for the entire industry, the deal that made private credit the most powerful force in finance. And it involves a company you definitely know. 2019. The company is called Nielsen Holdings. You know them from the TV ratings. They measure what you watch. A group of private equity firms wanted to take Nielsen private. The price tag? $16 billion. The banks looked at it and said, too big, too risky, we're out. So the private equity firms went to the private credit market. They assembled a consortium of direct lenders. Chad's fund, Jennifer's fund, 6 different firms. They put together a $9 billion loan package, the largest private credit deal in history at the time. Here's what happened next. The deal closed, the private equity firms took Nielsen private, everyone got their fees. Chad bought a Tesla, Jennifer bought a vacation home in the Hamptons. But the debt was massive. Nielsen had to pay hundreds of millions in interest every year. Then COVID hit. Advertising revenue collapsed. Nielsen started bleeding cash. And that's when the vultures circled. Stephen and his friends started buying Nielsen's debt at a discount. They knew a covenant breach was coming. By 2022, Nielsen was restructuring. The vultures took control. They fired executives, they cut costs, they sold off divisions. The original lenders, Chad and Jennifer, they got paid back eventually. But the vultures, they made a fortune. Nielsen survived, but it's a shell of what it was. The debt load crippled it, and the vultures own the pieces. So let's talk about who actually profits from this system. It's not the banks, it's not the companies, it's a small group of people. First, the fund managers, the general partners. They charge a 1.5% management fee on billions of dollars. That's $15 million a year just to exist, plus 20% of the profits. Second, the institutional investors, the pension funds, the insurance companies. They're the ones providing the capital. They're desperate for yield in a low-interest world. They'll take 8% from private credit, even if it means funding these predatory deals. And third, oh my God, the lawyers. Every deal, every restructuring, every bankruptcy generates millions in legal fees. They're the only ones who win no matter what. And who loses? The workers, the communities, the suppliers who don't get paid, the small businesses that get crushed by big companies loaded with debt. It's a transfer of wealth from the many to the few, and it's happening right now, in real time, with your retirement money. So, how do you escape? How do you protect yourself if you're an employee, a founder, or an investor? Here's the truth. You can't stop the machine, but you can refuse to be the victim. Rule number 1. If you're a founder selling your company, never take mezzanine debt. Never. It's the most expensive money you'll ever borrow, and it gives away your upside. Rule number 2. If you're an employee at a company owned by private equity, watch the debt load. If the company is paying more in interest than it's investing in growth, update your resume. The vultures are coming. Rule number 3. If you're an investor, ask where your money is going. Your 401k probably has private credit exposure through target date funds or insurance products. You're funding this system. And here's the contrarian take, the one that goes against 99% of financial advice. Don't try to beat them at their own game. You're not going to become a distressed debt expert. You're not going to out-negotiate Jennifer. Instead, focus on businesses that don't need private credit, businesses that grow slowly, with cash flow, without leverage. The boring businesses are the ones that survive, the ones that aren't on Chad's spreadsheet, the plumbing company that Bob actually runs, not the one loaded up with debt by private equity. Here's the thing about private credit. It's not evil, it's just indifferent. It's a machine optimized for one thing: extracting fees. The lenders aren't villains, they're just people playing the game the way it's set up. Chad needs his bonus, Jennifer needs her carry, Steven needs his returns. But the game is rigged. It's rigged so that the people who take the least risk make the most money. It's rigged so that failure is profitable for the lenders and devastating for everyone else. The next time you see a headline about a company being saved by private credit or a rescue financing deal, remember this video. Someone is getting rescued, but it's probably not the workers, it's probably not the community. It's the people who own the debt. And now, you know exactly how they do it. So here's what we covered today. We met the direct lender, Chad, who gets paid to close deals, the mezzanine cowboy, Jennifer, who wants your equity and your soul, and the distressed vulture, Steven, who prays for your failure. We walked through the Toys R Us graveyard, we saw the Nielsen deal, and we learned the 3 rules to protect yourself. If this video made you see the financial system a little differently, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that someone out there still wants the truth, not just another 5 stocks to buy now video. And subscribe if you want to stay on the outside looking in. Because in my next video, I'm going to show you exactly how I went from being the girl with the liberal arts degree to understanding this world well enough to teach it to you. But before you go, I want you to comment below. Have you ever worked for a company that got loaded up with debt? Did you see the vultures circling? Tell me your story. I read every single comment. Thanks for watching. Stay cynical, stay curious, and for God's sake, stop trusting the banks.